Do I have a motion to open the meeting?
Recording in progress.
So moved.
Terrific. Second?
Seconded.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Thank you. Any adjustments to the agenda, Annie?
Just a couple that I would ask for. If Miss Camuso is probably trying to get her child to bed right now, so if we could just, when she arrives, she could do that, so that maybe that Jen's presenting first. And then I would ask that regardless, whenever Jen presents, that immediately after that, we take a look at the calendar in case there's any questions about the feedback that she got on the open house. It's pretty self-explanatory, but we'll do those two things together. So we'll be flexible for Ms. Camuso's arrival and then just move the calendar to right after Ms. Dowd's presentation of the handbook. And that is it for adjustments.
Okay, great. So we'll start with the capital plan conversation first, but we move to handbook related conversations. Camuso first, Dowd second, and then the calendar.
Yeah, perfect. And just to set the stage before our presenter, Chip Phillips from Colliers, presents a 10-year capital plan. Mr. Phillips and Chris and I met. We took the facilities audit that you had previously seen with the recommendations over 10 years, and then we put them in what the public can see linked to the agenda, a recommended capital plan, and the school committee also has it as an Excel file. You can see that we looked at the projects over a 10-year period, and then for each project, we placed it in a fiscal year and identified a funding source, so that then in the presentation, Mr. Phillips will be presenting for you overall the percentage that we're looking at for town capital funds, for school choice funds, the money we hope to secure through grant funding, et cetera. So that's what you're looking at. But the school committee, what I would request that the school committee do tonight is take a look at hear the presentation from Mr. Phillips, take a look at that Excel file together. If there's any changes you'd like to see in terms of how those projects are distributed, or if you have any questions about the rationale as to why they're distributed a particular way, you could certainly ask those of Mr. Phillips or any of us. And then the school committee, if you agree to how it's organized, then essentially what's happening is we would take everything that's listed in fiscal year 23 that we say that we think town capital funding should support this project. And Chris and I, on Wednesday of this week, would take all of those items and put them into the town capital form and the town capital request form and send those over to the town. The town will then decide, the capital planning committee, which Paul is our liaison to the town's capital planning committee, the finance subcommittee of the town, and I think it's those two groups, will make recommendations to the select board about which items they're recommending for fiscal year 23, which items they're recommending are voted at fall town meeting, and which are voted at annual town meeting. So as part of this presentation, I would ask that the school committee consider, does it make sense to you? Would you like to see things either funded differently, moved to different places? And of course, if you have any questions about the project itself or the rationale for its order, you could ask that, and then let us know if we're making adjustments, and if not, understand that we are going to submit those requests to the town. And that's for this presentation, and then we'll move on to CPA after.
Great, thank you. Chip, welcome to the Hadley Schools. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much. So, right, if I share screen?
Yes, of course.
Can you see the slideshow?
Yes.
Perfect. So as Ann said, we did spend a good bit of time going through and talking through the projects in order to develop this capital plan that, goes out 10 years. Frequently kind of want to make sure you're keeping a good 5-year plan going, but we did want to push it out farther based on, where we saw some of the issues coming up down the road in the school, particularly in Hopkins Academy. So we really did plug things out over 10 years. We identified projects not only related to what we saw in the conditions assessment, but additional items that were known in town. For instance, the elementary school roof is under consideration, the athletic fields phase 2, and then also district-wide technology upgrades that are targeted for the next several years. We want to make sure we start to put together a comprehensive plan, not just recognizing the needs from the conditions assessment of Hopkins Academy. Funding sources that we looked at included town capital. We recognize some projects, smaller projects, can be funded through school choice funding. There are other grants that we'll look for related to security or safety, and another of those kinds of items where there might be grants that are offered separately from some of the MSBA work. We did recognize MSBA funding for particularly roof projects. There's money available through the cafe revolving that we wanted to identify for some of those upgrades. And then also CPA, which is really targeted for the Fields project. Certainly ask questions along the way. So the first thing is that the total need identified is $12.5 million in this plan, and that's in today's dollars. We'll talk when we look at the plan overall that we do start to put inflation on it, but in today's dollars, we identified $9.4 million at Hopkins Academy through the conditions assessment. The roof replacement is estimated to be $1.1 million. The fields, $1.5 million, and then another $400,000 in IT upgrades. As we identified funding potentials, $6 million, roughly half is going to be requested through town capital. MSBA for those roof projects, another 20%, $2.5 million. School choice, $1.7 million. CPA for the fields, $1.5 million. And then the grants and cafe revolving would pick up the rest of it. As mentioned, we're looking at a 10-year plan. We did, as we worked through it, we wanted to recognize the priorities that were identified through the condition assessment. So we identified some things were priority 1, which would be, targeted for the next 3 years. Some things are priority 2, which would be the next, 4 years 4 and 5. And then priority 3 projects would be years 5 and 10, 5 through 10. There is a big bump in year 2. Most of that is outside funding for the fields and for the particularly the elementary school roof that we're looking for in year 2. The rest of it, as you can see, is relatively flat between around $1.5 million to $2 million, moving forward. And also, trying to keep a nice split on funding as well. Just to kind of talk about some of the larger projects highlights at Hopkins Academy, there's a number of just kind of minor repairs that all lump together. We're looking to address those in the first 3 years. The cafeteria roof we're targeting for year 2. The HVAC replacement is going to be a long project, phased, looking right away to hire an engineering firm to put together an overall plan and as well as an implementation plan. We need to, study what type of system is it going to be? Will it be a traditional oil system again? Is there opportunities for geothermal? Is natural gas somewhere down the line a possibility? As certain upgrades need to be undertaken over the next 3 years, we want to make sure that they're not undertaken in conflict of the overall plan. So that's why we want to start out with that engineering plan. That'll help identify improvements that can be made right away. It'll identify improvements that are made, years 4, 5, 6 down the road, as we want to start to phase out those steam boilers and the pneumatic controls and bring that into a modern system with appropriate ventilation and possible air conditioning in certain places to improve the environment in the schools. There are needs for additional ventilation now, but again, we want to make sure that we're doing those, with an eye to the future, so that we're not, putting new equipment in that is going to need to be replaced 3 years down the road. So that's why we really want to start out with that engineering study. Locker room refurbishment, we have targeted for year 2. Interior finishes, really, looking at years 3 through 7. Most of those were priority 2 kinds of items for flooring and ceilings, casework, those kinds of things, interior, the wood doors. Repaving, we have targeted for year 5. Sprinkling the building, we've got year 7 and 8, and the remaining roof areas, which we are recognizing as a priority 3 right now, the areas outside of the cafeteria, we're looking at year 7 through 10. So there's some time on those. The elementary school roof, we're looking at year 2. Athletic fields also year 2. That's why there's that big $5 million allocation in year 2. And then IT upgrades focusing in years 2 through 7. Included in those are, we've got laptop replacements, we've got projectors and whiteboards, server replacements, Chromebook replacements, additional cameras. All of those are those kinds of things that'll be phased in over the next years 2 through 7 at both schools. And that's kind of where we are. So certainly, if anybody has thoughts, questions about how we place things, why, items that you'd like to see either move forward or back.
Thank you, Chip, for that presentation.
Sure.
And before I open it up for questions from the committee, I just want to recap for the viewing public, some of who've been following along this conversation we've been having for the last year, and others who are just arriving today to this conversation. We have 2 pretty solid schools from the standpoint of from foundation and bones, and what we're looking to do is really identify the core aspects, HVAC being a key old facet of Hopkins, and roofs being key things that are needing replacement, and a fields project that we've started and want to get over the finish line. And thank you for helping us see it in a sort of 10-year way that allows us to plan and utilize the funding we have access to through ESSER and other sources, and really project forward some of the other sources we may need to tap into. So that said, I don't have any big questions as it stands right now. My real big question was around HVAC, and you answered that in terms of the engineering study. I think it's a great idea to do an engineering study that gives us a more complete picture of what's accomplishable. So I'm glad to see that is there. So I'll pause there and see what other questions my fellow committee members have.
I'll bring up a question. Just curious, Chip and Annie, what criteria did you use to put these things in what bucket? Capital, MSBA, that kind of thing?
So in terms of determining a funding source, one, when it comes to something like MSBA or CPA, there are eligibility criteria. So those are very, very narrow. And because MSBA, and Chip, you can certainly jump in if I mess this up, but MSBA, we're looking at, in this case, accelerated things that would qualify for accelerated repair, which are boilers, roofs, and windows. The other bucket is a whole new build. It came to my attention, there's been some discussion in town that the school committee is talking about a brand new school building, not in this plan. We're talking about comprehensive renovations. So first of all, we identified, is the project even eligible? When we look at cafe revolving funds, those should be things that directly benefit the food service program. So for example, the roof over the cafeteria, the equipment in the cafe. So we couldn't use cafe revolving to replace tiles in some other part of the building. When we were looking at town versus school choice, let me minimize my view here so I can go to, so I can make sure that I'm seeing the plan with you guys. Give me 1 second. There we go. When we asked ourselves, should we be looking at town funding or should we be looking at school choice funding? Town funding, in some cases, if smaller items, we certainly looked at school choice. You can see some similarity there. We have several smaller items. When we are looking at larger items or items that have been on our capital plan for a while. So the renovation and repurposing of locker rooms you see in year 2 is town capital. This is something the town is familiar with this request. So that was sometimes part of the criteria. So one was, what projects are eligible for which sources of funding? Very small items we weren't going to bring before town capital, and certainly those items that the town had seen previously, we would present to the town. And similarly, when using grant funding. So if you see grant funding next to there, we were brainstorming around the kinds of grants that are typically available for safety and security. Is it something that's eligible for ESSER funding? Things like that.
Yeah, thanks, Annie. And then just looking at the Hopkins roof, I know it was redone, but it's probably that was with MSBA funding a while ago. So I see you push that off towards the end of this decade. So
Right.
That's probably getting to its useful life by then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Also, Chip had mentioned that getting to the end of its useful life, but there's also, is it, Chip, that MSBA won't fund things too early or that you're unlikely, right? They prioritize based on how old it is.
Both. So, right. So there is a starting point that it has to be of a certain age for boilers and roofs. I think the boiler age is I want to say 25 years. Last year, I think it was like 32 years was the youngest boiler that they funded. So, there's more funding requests than there is available funding. So, you have to meet that criteria. Roofs, I believe it's 20 years. But then again, they may not replace a roof at 20 years because they're going to run out of funding. So there may, we're targeting that range, but that may have to slide a little bit in order to get that funded.
You remember, Chip, when the Hopkins roof was redone?
I do not. I believe Dr. Young was superintendent, and Chip may be looking at something, or Chris may remember.
Yeah, I'm looking to see if I
curious.
find it in my notes. I don't remember off the top of my head.
If it was under Nick Young's tenure, it was before my time.
I think overall this is a really helpful approach. Thank you. Yeah, it's sobering when you put it down there. 100 some odd rows of.
Yeah, but the reality is that if you start thinking in terms of, new construction, you'd be talking about, 25 to 30 million minimum for the size building you have, and that would be all at once. So here we are spreading out, 25 or, what was it?
12 and a half, yeah,
12 and a half over 10 years.
right.
Plus inflation, it gets up to closer to 16 million in the end.
Yeah,
Especially early on, the early couple of years, we're looking at some pretty significant inflation in the industry.
yeah,
And talking to estimators and contractors, we're carrying 7.5% for the first couple of years, then down to 6, 4.5, and then getting back to the 4 level, which is historically what we've seen in construction. But we're anticipating that this is going to continue for the next several years.
that makes sense.
And can I, because I just missed it. Chip, what was the figure that you gave for compared to new construction?
Yeah,
25 to 30 million for a 66,000 square foot building, 62,000 square foot building.
just watching neighboring towns like Amherst and those are potentially bigger buildings. Those numbers they're talking about double that.
Yeah. Right.
Double that, and they also have had now cost increases, right, that have been significant, which is to be expected given inflation. The only other thing before you continue your conversation, just know overall, as people are saying, this makes sense. There's one thing that I do want to continue conversing with Chris about. It doesn't affect the town capital side. It's on that engineer. That actually may very well be an ESSER eligible expense. And it may be more logical for us to use that funding because of the timeline by which we need to expend that funding. But again, that doesn't affect the town capital request. The question is it school choice or is it ESSER funding? It's not. That's just one thing I wanted to point out to the school committee. Oh, Chris is trying to talk. Is he not covered?
Yeah, I just didn't want to jump in. I did get the okay from the state that it is ESSER fundable, I guess, if that's a word.
Great, so we have the choice.
Yep.
Terrific. All right, Chris, I'm going to lower your hand. And so continuing on with other questions for Chip. Christine.
I have under the list, it says renovate and repurpose the locker rooms. What do we mean by repurpose?
So, the way typically when we have seen locker room renovations from this vintage, there becomes additional space once you start to renovate those because generally kids aren't showering as much. The space requirements today are much less than they were when these buildings were designed. So I don't know what that is. You're going to hire a designer. You're going to figure out exactly what you want to do with those spaces. And there may be a way of capturing space for other purposes or, smaller space, don't know. But, it's not likely that it will be the same configuration that you have now.
Okay.
Great.
I mean, a lot of school districts have grabbed a health classroom or something like that out of or some sort of physical education classroom out of former locker space.
Terrific. Thank you. Tara, Ethan?
I just wanted, I guess my thinking, Paul, you kind of stole my thunder. I was thinking about the roof as well. But I guess my question is pretty simple or basic. I don't know who wants to answer, but are we confident that we have 7 to 10 years in that roof since it's going to be that time until we touch it?
We should. I mean, there will be repairs here and there, but based on its age, based on, its maintenance, we saw it as a priority 3. Which would put it in that time frame. This is, a 10-year plan is only a guide. Particularly once you get past 5 years, you're putting things in that makes sense. If for some reason that you need to bump that up a couple of years because it starts leaking more, certainly the plan has that flexibility.
I don't have any questions, but thank you for putting this together. I think that this kind of achieves our goal that we had talked about in our retreat last year of kind of figuring out, is it feasible and permissible to just simply update Hopkins, or do we need to do something more drastic? And so, like Annie had mentioned, hiring Collier, we found out that we don't need to build a new building, that it's much more feasible, and our building is in much better shape than what we needed. But being able to have somebody come in and kind of prioritize and create this list is very helpful for us to have and kind of reference to and have in place. So thank you.
Welcome.
I would just say, I just want to call out, which I know all the school committee regularly acknowledges this. Chip just made the statement about given the condition and the maintenance of the roof. So overall, part of the reason that we are in a position of being able to renovate existing facilities is the hard work that our facility staff puts into these buildings and taking care of them. And I just really want to acknowledge it's a small school with a very small and mighty team and the facility staff, and they've done a wonderful job over the years keeping those facilities up.
Thanks for recognizing that, Annie. And thank you, Chip, again for this. Team, we will be voting on this capital plan and also the request for the town. And the rest of that conversation, Annie, should we delay till later when there is a vote, or?
No, so we can start, well, I suppose let's move on to the CPA discussion, and then we can go back and take care of all three of these at once. We move on.
Great. Thank you.
Do you want me to stick around?
I don't think you have to. School committee's asked all the questions they need. I think you're good. Thank you, Chip.
All right.
I mean, you're welcome to. You're welcome to stay for the night. Really.
Certainly give me a call on my cell phone if any other questions come up later.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much.
Right. Okay. So then the question is on the capital plan, we have the fields as being fully funded by CPA funding. So I also in your agenda am going to ask that you open the draft CPA document. I got to get it open too. Would be helpful. And essentially on the draft application for September 1st for the CPA, you'll see that I have put in parentheses, insert amount. So the question is, would we like to ask CPA for the entire amount? In phase 1, and Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, my recollection is when I read back over our proposals, particularly when we went back for some additional funding, that we asked CPA for roughly 80% of the funding, and we provided roughly 20% of the funding. So the two blanks on this CPA proposal, which I would like to get to them tomorrow, are total amount from CPA and CPA funding request. Actually, if you skip to page 3 out of 3, CPA funding request, CPA request as a percentage of total budget, other funding sources and amounts. Those are all blank. So I just need the school committee to make a determination about that. We would adjust the capital plan accordingly in terms of just funding sources. And then you could also vote to approve the capital plan with the understanding that everything that's slated for town capital funding, Chris and I would submit to the town this week. So a discussion of the school committee and thoughts on the CPA request and the other funding source. At this point in time, my recommendation would be think of that as school choice and CPA. I do know that we were successful, and I'm very grateful. Board of Trustees, East Hampton Savings Bank, many other people, and individuals in the community who contributed in phase 1. But at this point, I would suggest that we just think about school choice and CPA, given how much money this is, and the fact that we want to get things underway.
Yes, that fundraising effort was at a different time. It was pre-pandemic, it was pre-inflation. There was a lot of circumstances were quite different. Before we dive into deliberation and discussion, I'd love to get your thoughts, Paul, on why we landed on the 20% and how you feel that factored into the final decision-making on the last go-around, and how important it is or not to contribute in that kind of way.
Yeah, to be honest, Mary, I was trying to think about that. I don't know, Annie, if you recall why we came up with 20%.
Yeah, I was just going to come to your rescue there and say, in fairness to Paul, I don't think either of us know. So ignorance is company. I think, I could double check this with CPA, but it's reasonable to assume that CPA usually does, when I think of other projects, that they do expect that projects are not 100% funded by CPA. Now, I'm not sure when we're talking North Hadley Town Hall. I'm thinking of the Zaturka Park and some other ones that there was an expectation of contribution. And I don't think it was ever, and it certainly isn't in their documentation now. I think it was kind of an unspoken guideline, perhaps, previously, is what I'm recollecting there. And that being.
I think that's right. And we had a lot of conversation with CPA. I know we're going to submit something and have another conversation. They have their September meeting coming up, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the one thing that would be a good discussion point with them, is if they do have that expectation. That's what we've done in the past. I mean, you could collectively look at this as one large project, phase 1 and phase 2. And then overall, you'd say we essentially give 10%, maybe something around that number. So I do think there's a lot of momentum on this project now, right? There's a lot of use of that walkway. I think the public is more interested in a larger walkway. So I think we're at a different place to say, hey, look, there's clearly we've shown what we hypothesized, that this would become a public benefit, the walkway, and it would be well used by the students and the town, and that's true. And so maybe I think it is fair to go back to CPA and just be honest about it and just say, look, we really want to complete this. We were always talking about this as a multi-phased project. Coming back now, yes, the cost, frankly, is a little bit higher than I expected, and that's a lot to do with where we sit globally, right, with inflation. And so, but I think there's no point in waiting. We've always thought about this as 2 phases. Let's get the second phase done. What is it that CPA can do to help make that happen?
I would say, Paul, you're making me think of a good option here, is that we could also, we could leave it as at this time, just a CPA request, and indicate when I submit it, and in the email, I can let folks know that we'd like to talk with CPA about kind of their thoughts and expectations around local contribution, and maybe at that time also show them how, why we're leaning so heavily on CPA for this project, because it's in the context of this 10-year, $12.5 million plan that we're committing a couple of millions of school choice dollars to. So certainly I hadn't thought about that I'm submitting the plan, but certainly I submit the plan with an email, and we can have this conversation with them at their meeting in September.
That's right, and I thought that was the intent, right? With your previous presentation that Chip gave about all the different funding sources, this is sort of a multi-town, statewide effort, essentially, to fund this $12.5 million worth of work here, and we're asking CPA to help do part of that.
Any other thoughts from committee members?
I think Annie just answered my question, because I had 2. One question was 80% during phase 1. I just don't remember what that amount was, that ask was to CPA. And 2, if there was a definitive ask, if there was any rebuttal from CPA, or was it just a yes, no answer? So I kind of like the idea of more of a discussion and rationale behind it, if that's possible. I think that kind of answers my question.
We went to CPA multiple times. The first time was more theoretical. We had some, and they gave us some seed money to go and do the further design. So we did that, and then came back with a much more specific ask. And I think at that point, Annie, we asked for a certain amount, and they gave us a certain amount.
Yeah, and then they gave a second one. So our first ask, I forgot about the seed money.
Right.
There was seed money, and we went with the $400,000 ask.
That's right.
And then we needed an additional 185, and I just read it, and I can't remember what the 185,000. So all in all, and we applied some school choice to that too, and we did do some fundraising as well. So it's
it's very, very generous from the trustees and
absolutely. Yep. So yeah, there was actually 3 kind of the getting started, the initial based on the cost estimate, and then we did ask for some additional money after that. But we could certainly have a conversation with them, and I could explain, as I said, that we would welcome the chance to talk with them and place this project in a much broader context of building and field renovation in Hadley Public Schools in both buildings.
I have to say, I philosophically like the idea of contributing to a portion with the funding that we've saved. It's overall, we will be spending quite a bit in capital expenditure. And I wonder whether we can reduce the number of times we're going back and forth before a fall meeting if we are trying to hit a conclusion and a decision point from CPA before fall town meeting, whether it makes sense to yes, agree that we are going to go have an open conversation, but also decide and be ready to contribute as much as, say, 10%, and see if an amount of 10% would suffice for the overall project this time around. I don't want to indicate the expectation that we're hoping for 100%. I mean, it could be we land there. That's fine. But I'm just feeling as though indicating our interest in putting in our savings towards this plan also goes a long way to demonstrating to the town that we are fiscally prudent and also have a share in the outcome of this project.
In certain points, it's really just taking it from one pot to get to another pot. And so if we do pay 10% of the fields, that means we're not spending 10% on those long lists that Chip just mentioned. And honestly, that's the question I have as CPA is funds we all pay into with our property taxes, and it grows, and they spend money on projects just like this. So it's a healthy pot for us to ask for. No other aspects of that long list can we go to CPA for. So I hear what you're saying, Humira, but I wonder if we put it in the big perspective of here's the big ask, here's CPA's role, here's how the school choice is going to contribute to so many other aspects that are needed. But it's worth asking CPA if they say no, our expectation, fundamental default expectation is X percentage comes on a CPA project. Then that changes the story.
Do we know if fall town meeting is what they aim to have information for voting purposes?
Yes. So we would meet with them on September 12th at 7 p.m. So if we'd meet that evening, and then I believe that they are looking to have their recommendations ready for the warrant for town meeting. CPA recommends, and they have the vote there for fall town meeting, which is at the end of October, I think.
And warrants have to be set and ready to go with town hall by a certain date.
Correct, but CPA will have worked that out because that's their deal, right? So we don't have to worry about that. We've met the CPA deadline is that we have to get this in by the last day of this month. So we'll have our what you have in front of you in the agenda. We'll have that in by tomorrow. Then we will go before them. I know for a fact they have a meeting on the 12th. They might have 2. So they'll probably end up telling us when they want to talk to us. They may want to talk to us both times. They may have us go, no, CPA meetings on the 12th. It looks like it's when it's scheduled. So I'm sure they'll ask the people who submitted things to come on the 12th, have a conversation with each person who's put in for a project, and then make recommendations. And they may say at that point, we'd like to fund this project, but they'll deliberate just as you are, but we're only up to this amount and it will require you to do something else. And we will meet, we'll have a regular school committee meeting, I believe, before fall town meeting. We needed to have a special one just to discuss this for some reason. We could do that too.
Okay. So it sounds like we have a plan. We'll go ahead and submit for the full cost of the project and start the dialogue. And based on the feedback we receive, we'll respond. We'll base our contribution, if any, from there.
Perfect. So the votes that we would need from the school committee are to approve the 10-year capital plan. And of course, just a reminder, all you have to do is approve it with the understanding then that everything listed for town capital under FY23, Chris and I will be submitting this week to the town on their forms that they asked for. That's one vote to approve that. And actually, I think that's fine, because in that it already says that CPA, the entire amount for the fields is listed as funded by CPA. So in approving the capital plan, it ticks every box.
Okay, and you'd like us to vote on all action items at the very end?
Oh, you can vote it. You can take it down. You can. It's up to you. However you want to do it. Whatever's easiest for you. Yeah.
Do I hear a motion to approve the capital plan as presented?
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, Annie.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, moving on. We are discussing changes to the handbook, and we're starting with Hopkins Academy. Welcome, Ms. Camuso.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm late. I'm just going to actually shut off the sound on the baby monitor. I did summarize, everyone should have gotten the other document that summarized and included the page numbers for the changes that were made. A lot of the changes in the handbook this year were not as significant as previous years. We did some sort of overhauls the last couple of years, but there were a few different areas that we updated and that I did want to point out. And then if you guys have any questions about anything I summarized or just anything else you saw in general, certainly I'm happy to answer what I can around that. So one of the things that we have happen a lot is that families drop off food. And so that was happening more and more frequently. In addition, because of COVID and unintended pandemic reality was that there are things like DoorDash and delivery systems that happen more and more, and kids who wanted to have food delivered to the school. So we had an added section around families obviously can still drop off food, but when it would be appropriate to go get it. So rather than leaving the middle of class, making sure that students are leaving at breakfast or lunch or during passing time, and then additionally not allowing any sort of delivery of food to students at the school building. So it was kind of a weird one, but it was something that I think post-pandemic was just happening more and more. We also added the one-to-one laptop program language to the handbook. That policy, though, is the same one that we've already looked at as a school and that kids get separately. It just wasn't in the handbook. So we just made sure that it was in the handbook as well for families. We also, I'll come back to the cell phone one because I know that's probably a bigger topic. So I'll come back to that one. We had some language around senior privileges. So the way that senior privileges have worked previously is there's a bunch of requirements around GPA, attendance, and conduct. And then those are checked quarterly, and then students might lose their privileges and then not be able to earn them again for another quarter, which, as you can imagine, can also be very upsetting for seniors sometimes during the fourth quarter. So we made a couple changes to that. So one change is that instead of seniors having to reach these certain thresholds initially, we want to say that all seniors can be eligible for senior privileges in order to be more equitable and inclusive. in particular, some of our students with IEPs frequently cannot earn senior privileges because of their GPAs. So we did want to make that change. And then instead, hold that as a privilege and an incentive. And if a student is, failing multiple classes or coming in late every single day, then say, okay, we're going to suspend these for this amount of time and then come back to that later. And then they can sort of earn those back when they've made the improvement that they need to make. So it's a little bit more flexible around how that works. The other changes we made to what their privileges actually are, there was language in there about parking spaces, which a class had wanted a few years ago, which isn't really something that we can enforce and wasn't really something that was much of an issue. So we took that off, but then instead added that they could leave class 5 minutes early before lunch. Lunch this year is 26 minutes instead of 30 minutes. So that kind of gives seniors those few minutes back for traveling or leaving campus, and it's during their electives. So it is just, kind of that extra bonus piece for them. We added, which used to be in the handbook, but somehow disappeared, our language around searches. So we connected with the legal department around that and just added that back in. I'm not sure what happened to it. Annie actually caught that for us, that it was mentioned on a page that did not exist. So that's in there, which isn't super exciting, but it is important to have. And then we had a policy that you guys have already approved and reviewed around restraint that just wasn't in the handbook as well. And so the attorney suggested that we include it in the handbook. So that was added to the handbook, taken directly from what you guys had as your policy. And so then the last one, the cell phone piece, I know we've done a lot of conversation around the cell phone policies, and we're not moving forward with Yonder at the time. So the thinking on our end as a school is that it's really important for us to get clear about what the problem is. I thought, we had a really good conversation about, is there a problem? What is the problem? That seems to be different for different people. And so trying to convene the stakeholders to figure out what is the problem if it exists. There's also the idea that, there might, based on research be a problem, but it might not be an actual problem for people in the community. But either way, what is that? How do we know if it's a problem? And then what do we want to do about it? Because even my own previous suggestion, about having them in the front of the room is kind of against research, which shows that even just seeing your cell phone drops your scores on assessments. So I think it's just more complex than what we could come up with within the time we had over the summer when our staff and students are not there. And so I'm looking to spend this year to kind of look at that together with interested stakeholders and then get feedback from all of the stakeholders around that and see where we end up at the end of the year. So for this year, we just made a few changes to the current policy. So for example, there's some language around cell phones being away, which is kind of vague. So we added that should be either in their bag or in their locker. We also eliminated, we clarified some pieces about when to use them. So they can still use them with permission. They can use them to take pictures of homework, to communicate with their families. So we just gave those specifics for staff. And then we decided to eliminate things like AirPods and smartwatches. I think the language in the handbook is the Bluetooth wireless texting capable headphones, whatever category or type of headphone like that, which becomes really problematic. And we have regular fun old-fashioned headphones for kids if they need them, certainly in the school. And then the smartwatches too, of any kind. I should clarify, again, texting capable. So I know there's things like a Fitbit that doesn't have any type of internet or texting, like that's fine. But anything where they would be accessing text or internet or things like that, we're just trying to reduce them having those different types of distractions. And so just that was something that wasn't in the policy before because they didn't used to exist. So we sort of had to update with technology as things change, and not everyone has them. And certainly kids could have them after school for their practices. They just can't have them within the school day. So if they're in their locker and they never come out, that's not really an issue. But if they have them, then they will fall under the same consequences as a regular device, and they will be confiscated. So that was the other piece that we sort of tightened up a little bit, was the what happens. And that piece, is also to kind of help us collect data as well. So we added, making sure to add it to School Brains. If a student has their phone in a way that they're not supposed to, they don't sort of get this, oh, okay, put it away. If it falls out of their bag, that's different. And I have examples for staff around some of these different things. But in general, it's confiscated. And then if they have it again, it's confiscated. And then a parent or guardian has to come pick it up. And it just sort of continues in that way. So we made some changes around that. And I think that's the majority of them. So what questions or comments do people have, if any? You're muted, Humira.
Thanks. Thank you for taking us through this. Really appreciate it. And I also really appreciate the thoughtfulness around the cell phone strategy. We are definitely, I'm keen to hear how it goes, the complement of change in policies and procedures and what we learn. So I hope that we'll have a chance to get some kind of like interim mid-year feedback on how it's going to determine whether we need to change course. And Christine.
All right, around the cell phone policy. So students will still be able to ask permission from the teacher to use their cell phones.
Yes.
Okay.
So we didn't change that aspect. We left that as is.
Okay. Are we talking about just the cell phone policy or the handbook in general right now?
Oh, the
All
handbook.
of the
in general.
handbook.
Okay, I have just one thing that I wanted to, actually, there's two things I wanted to address. The first one is on page 101 of the handbook. Under the examples of bias incidents.
Yeah.
The language that says, or racial customs, the third bullet.
Yep.
Is there a reason we use that language? Because customs are based on culture, not on race. So I'm a little.
I believe, Annie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure these particular sections all come from the attorneys and the state definitions and laws.
Give me 1 second to make sure mine goes to the right page.
Under the civil rights policies, hate crimes and bias incidents.
I just got to get to page 101 as my computer is really slow to load. I apologize for that. It's taking forever to load. And then
That or school committee one. I can say it's prior to me, so, and it just has gone through every year, Chris, so I haven't.
Yeah. No, I just couldn't find the definition anywhere. Like I tried to find like what exactly is a racial custom. I know customs are based on culture and ethnicity, but to me, there's not necessarily racial customs. So I just wanted to see if we could clarify the language.
I can find out if that's the legal definition.
yeah, I'm looking there too.
Or
Right.
if it's something that we had as a school district. And then, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to look at that and clarify and make an adjustment. I think if it's don't know for sure, Annie, but if it's a legal definition, I'm not sure that we can change it.
Civil rights policies. hate crimes.
Attorneys could tell us that.
Yeah, so there is, So this probably is, we can check with the attorney, but my guess is that you are correct, that this is actually one part of larger school committee policy, but also that it is attorney recommended because of, like, that's how the laws are written. I can agree with you. So one, we can verify that, the judging on its placement there and where it is and where it says hate crimes and all the legal references in the section, we'll verify with the attorney that was this attorney recommended language for us, and certainly can seek then a legal definition for that term. Yeah, or, I mean, certainly the school committee has the right to suggest any revisions that you would like to make in there too. So
I just thought it should be changed to cultural customs. That's all.
I can see how if there will be negative comments to a student from another country or another ethnicity or of another race, that they may be referencing racial characteristics and ethnic customs.
Right.
And calling those two out specifically would actually cover more comprehensively both of those areas. I agree, racial customs, there is no such thing. There is no race that has a specific custom. There is no difference between the races. So racial characteristics and ethnic customs, it would be, I'd be willing to swap out in reference, so long as the grammar read correctly.
Yeah, and the attorney can check, so I can make that suggestion to her and then she can verify it. And then, Annie, we should probably just double check whether or not this is also in a specific school committee policy.
yeah, so we'll take this as two things, because if it is a policy, it was also MASC attorney recommended. But the question that we'll ask, is there anything the school committee would like to replace the phrase racial customs with racial characteristics and ethnic customs? Is there any legal reason why we cannot do that? I can't imagine there is, but we'll just verify that. That's our job to do that for you. And assuming the attorney says, no, that's fine, I'm also taking this to mean that the school committee, if this is in fact in school committee policy, that we replace it there as well. So we would do both.
Yes.
Am I hearing you all correctly? Okay.
And Chris, you said there was a second area?
Just under the unexcused absences on page 10, it says that I'm sorry, it's about the definitions. It says something about truancy, but truancy really isn't defined. So maybe just adding, it would be considered truancy if a child is willfully failing to attend school without lawful, reasonable excuse. Just because it says we define truancy, but then there's no definition of truancy.
Okay. That's a good
Because
idea.
a lot of people may not know the difference between just unexcused and a truant. They may think that, oh, if my kid's just absent and I didn't call in, that they're truant. That's not the same thing as a willful, disregard for the rules, and that's all.
Yeah, and so I'll look at that and then I'll ask the attorneys again if I wrote down the language you suggested, Chris, but what works in terms of the definition there. And sometimes they have one that they will also share. So I can follow up on that.
Great. Thank you, Christine, for bringing up both of those. Any other comments on the handbook?
Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
I just had a question about the cell phone policy or the changes to the cell phone policies, and everything you laid out in regards to the changes sounds reasonable to me. My question is, and I know you mentioned that it'll be documented in school brains. I'm just curious more about specifically how you plan on collecting data, how you plan on analyzing it. Will there be further surveys done? Like, I know when this was brought to us, we did the surveys. Are there going to be teacher surveys? How periodic will they be? Are you tracking it, by grade? How is this being assessed? When is it being assessed? Just a little bit more of because I'm guessing you're not going to just put all this in at the end of the year or go, okay, how did this go? I'm guessing this is an active, document. So I'm just curious kind of what that's going to look like.
Yeah, so I have a draft action plan with some different steps and some different sort of timelines around that. So the beginning of the year would have some surveys that would go out to the different stakeholders with a variety of different questions to help define the problem and then how concerning that problem is. Because I think, again, those are two separate questions that we're trying to answer. One could say there is a problem, but also not find it, compelling that something needs to be done about it. And then in addition to that, we're looking at the data quarterly. So I have an outline of some different meetings set up for people who want to be a part of this task force, and they would look at that data together. You can export everything from School Brains. So when you do that, you can look at it and filter it by grade, or, you know, how many times a particular student did, or even in a particular class. So there's all sorts of different categories of information that you can look at around that. And then certainly when I meet with the people who want to be a part of the task force work, if there are some suggestions around, you know, further survey data later in the year, you know, I'm open to that. Like, one of the first things we'll do is take a look at the action plan that I outlined and see if we are missing anything. And I'm happy to email that to you guys if you want to see that. I think it might be in the newsletter I'm sending out tomorrow, but I can also email it to you separately.
Who is comprised of the task force, or who do you envision it being comprised of?
So anyone who wants to be a part of it, but in particular, I would like to see parents and guardians, staff, and students. And so, as you can imagine, I haven't had a huge amount of students respond to my request for participation from this or for the community read yet, or as much staff as I would like, since it's been summer. So I'm hoping that once we're back in school, I'll get a bit more, and I can also recruit some people in particular. So I've had a few people volunteer, a couple parents and a couple staff members and one student right now who have all volunteered. And I'm just waiting for the school year to kind of get back in to see if I can get a little bit more interest and participation. And then we'll convene and have our first meeting, which right now is scheduled for October 6th, to develop the surveys.
So I'd be curious if, you know, this is something that was brought, not the last meeting, but the meeting before, I think, I forget, to school committee's attention, right? This is not something that school committee put on there. It was something that was brought to our attention, and it became kind of charged pretty quickly. And it's pretty important for staff and for parents and students of the school community. So I would just ask that when we do surveys, that summary of the results, or summary on a quarterly basis, if that's when everyone is going to be meeting, that at that next school committee meeting, we could get kind of an overview of how things are going. And, you know, I guess my point behind it is that, you know, I would anticipate that if there's something glaring at your first quarterly meeting, you know, that maybe, you know, changes might be made sooner than at the end of the school year, right? Like, if we're seeing some glaring information that's concerning, then I would kind of expect us to take more immediate action on adjusting things rather than at the end of the year. So I would just be curious to hear kind of feedback from the surveys, how things are going, so we can kind of, as a school committee, just kind of compare when the surveys first went out versus the change in your policies now, and, you know, how it's working, just keeping us on top of the information as we go.
Sure.
I want to add to that request that we are especially mindful as we are collecting data of what's happening, where things, where infractions take place, and for what reason, that we're keeping in the back of our mind what we know the research says around students of color experiencing disproportionate disciplinary infractions, research-wise across the United States. And so as we are collecting the data about who's getting disciplined, I hope that we are also being mindful of collecting the data about what the issues are that are perpetuating the inequity, if there is any. So just being watchful of that. And I'm happy to share more input on that. If you're interested, come seek me out.
Of course.
Hey, April, one question on the handbook. On page 11, it's about an issue that was near and dear to my heart, bringing lunch that had been forgotten on the table. And so I just want to make sure, so it says here in 11, parents can drop off food for students. However, students can only pick it up breakfast and lunch periods or passing time. Is that what you're saying? So the parents can drop it off anytime, but the students can only get it at certain times.
Absolutely, right? Yes. Is that clear enough, or do you think I need
No, it's good. That's not how I understood it when you
when I presented it. Sorry.
Yeah, so no,
No,
that's-
parents can come, delivery services cannot. So that's that's a clarification.
That's a great one. That's a new one. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it is a new one. It's all, post COVID, there's some weird stuff out there. It's
Yeah,
definitely, definitely new. And it's not like there's a ton of people, but kids are creative these days. So no, but parents, guardians, certainly family can drop anything off. What we just don't want to see, which we were starting to see more and more again post COVID, was students leaving in the middle of class to go pick up
That's
like
right.
their Dunkin' Donuts and then coming back to class. And, they can wait the 30 more minutes till passing time to get it.
Gotcha.
But Paul, you may not get a job for DoorDash and drop off your children's things.
I was thinking, that's right. I have that. I've had that job for about 19 years now. Yeah, that's right.
All right. Any other questions or comments on the handbook changes? All right. Hearing none. Do I hear a motion to approve the handbook changes as recommended?
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Motion passes. Thank you, Ms. Camuso.
Thank you.
And over to the elementary school, Ms. Dowd.
I will say elementary school DoorDash is running rampant. It's crazy.
I was actually going to thank Principal Camuso for putting that into the handbook, because I've been telling my own children that it was already in the handbook, that it was a violation. That's how I skirted around not having them order food right to the Hopkins store. But Paul, I understand your struggle because I'm
Yeah.
currently in that now.
Of course.
Yes. Can
Yeah.
you please just drop something off, or can I walk over to Pbis? I'm like,
That's
no,
right.
you're in 8th
Right.
grade. You cannot do that.
Yeah.
So I just want to say thank you so much for letting me talk tonight. The updates to the HES handbook are minimal. But first, I just want to say thank you so much to Melissa Steinbeck, who's been my summer admin assistant, for helping me review things. Melissa has stepped up in a great way to support me and the opening of school in Miss Feltovic's absence. And I know Ms. Feltovic would also say thank you so much to Melissa for helping me and getting things ready and prepared for students to arrive next week and staff coming back this week. Some of the bullets you all received in your packet. The first change is on page 2, where I've added a principal message to our HES families and students. This was a nice addition that Principal Camuso had put into the Hopkins one, and I felt like I should add it as well, although I would argue her picture is much better than mine. Page 8 is my next change. That's a change in the student dismissal procedure. Parents are now allowed into the building. This was an adjustment we made towards the end of the school year last year. And because of COVID, we had reduced the number of people that were allowed in the building. So now we have more of a traditional pickup where parents are allowed to come into the building, go to the cafeteria, go to the gym rather, collect their child for dismissal and go on their way. And so that's kind of a nice change back to the way we had done things before. So now it's reflected in our dismissal procedure. Page 16, this is language recommended by the school attorney that highlights parents' rights to notify us if they don't want their children's information to be public. That's around privacy. Page 22, this is language around the student's dress code that aligns more with the Hopkins dress code. Just a note to families that we will continue to send out notifications to families about proper clothing when the weather changes, and reminders about snow gear, hats, mittens, things like that to prepare when we go outside during recess. Page 30 is another recommendation of from the school attorney to remove language about illegal searches. Principal Camuso referenced that. Page 43, I took out the language concerning kindergarten report cards. A couple years back, we had kindergarten students only receive 2 report cards. Now they receive 4. So families have double the information and communication around how their children are doing. And it aligns with what the rest of the school is doing, which is the 4 report cards. So we amended that. Page 43 included language describing our PBIS, our positive behavior interventions and supports. This is our school-wide approach to monitoring and supporting students' behavior. I place this by the code of conduct because while we have a code of conduct, our overall message is for our young students is that we're here to teach not only academics, but also what it means to be a kind person and kind to one another. Page 56, another recommendation from our attorney to include IEP team will conduct a manifestation determination meeting. This is around our policies. Again, just language that our attorney wanted us to include. And lastly, page 79, the physical restraint policy. This is, again, school committee policy, but we just have it reflected in the HES handbook, like Hopkins added theirs as well. And that was a recommendation from the attorney. Those are all the bullets that I have, but I'm open for any questions, comments, feedback.
Thank you, Ms. Dowd. I do not have any questions, but I'll open it up to the rest of the team.
I don't have any questions, but thank you for keeping the drop-off process the same. I know a lot of parents really like that new process. And, you know, I know that when we started that, it was a little bumpy, and the changes that you made along the way have made it super efficient for parents who are trying to like hurry up and get their kid and get to work, or if they've got other little kids in the car. It's fantastic. So thank you.
You're very welcome. There's always a lot of conversation about drop off and pickup, and I'm going to continue to help families out that have multiple children, little children, getting in and out of the building safely. Our drop off is going to continue to be the same, like you said, Tara, because we recognize that the drop off in the morning went very well for parent drop off. And if it's not broke, don't fix it kind of mentality. And so we're going to continue with that. Obviously, we needed to change the pickup because security and safety is very important. Not so much when you're dropping off, because those are the people that the children are supposed to be with. But picking up, we really have to make sure that we know that our students are going home with the appropriate adult. And so that's why we needed to still put those safeguards in place for parent pickup.
I just wanted to say thank you and give a shout out to Melissa Steinbeck, who was one of my students and has not changed. She was amazing then. She's amazing now.
She's really been, I really wanted to give a shout out to her because she really has picked up a lot of extra work and trying to make things run smoothly. And as you know, Ms. Feltovic's is a difficult person to replace. And she was been in the front office for many years, but I'm really excited, and she has let me know that she's very excited about her replacement, who's Kelly Higgins, who started today. And
I didn't know that. That's wonderful. Yep. I like Kel.
And so we had a great first day, and we're feeling a little bit calmer in the front office. And so we're just ready to go.
Great. Good luck.
Thank you.
I do want to remind, this is for the public, the school committee, you received this, and just a reminder that when you voted to approve Hopkins, this language will be added, and it will also be added to HES. The principals did not have this. The attorney sent this to us just prior to the weekend, and that is just the reminder that there will be a statement that electronic video, not audio surveillance, is used in school buildings and on school grounds to deter crime and enforce the district rules and policies, as well as the laws of Massachusetts and the United States. A video recording may be subject to the provisions of the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act and Massachusetts Student Record Law. Access to the video surveillance system is limited to building principals, assistant principals, and other district personnel as approved by the superintendent or his designee. And this is similar to that we do have recordings on school buses. Those families are aware of this because we've used it to kind of investigate things as they've come up, but we want to make sure that language is in both handbooks so people know that if they enter our district.
Thank you, Annie.
And just two things. One is I must say I always enjoy reading the recess rules about things. The slides are for going down, not walking up. And then Jen, your picture's great. So, yeah.
Paul, I appreciate that. It's funny. It's one of those rules where you're like, it's common sense. Do I need to put it down? And the answer is yes. Yes. We constantly need to remind kids that slides are for going down, not up.
No
So,
biting, no sticks. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Great. Any final comments or questions on the handbook? Okay. So do I hear a motion to approve the handbook changes as recommended?
So moved.
Seconded.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, Ms. Dowd.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you very much. I'm going to lock up Hadley Elementary School and go home. So if you guys
Have a
need
good
anything,
night.
thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Take care. All right, moving along, we are looking next at the calendar. And
Yes.
right?
Yes. So yes, and
I'm going to stay for this one.
yeah. So I am. My famous last words. This is the last calendar you see. I think it is. So the two things. Ms. Dowd spoke with faculty members, and also some parents gave her feedback that they would like to see a more traditional open house in the fall. So we are looking to have open house for Hadley Elementary on September 29th, the evening of September 29th. Hopkins Academy will have its open house in April, so we're moving it up from May. This would allow parents with children in both buildings to go to each building, not have to feel like they have to split their time. And it makes sense in terms of school choice. So Hopkins Academy is always trying to aggressively kind of go after school choice. More so, there's more competition for high school seats than there is for, meaning competition, there are more high school choices for kids than there are elementary choices. So trying to get school choice applicants is not as much of an issue at HES as it is at Hopkins. So we're timing Hopkins again to kind of time with school choice season. Also, it's a time where parents can then see what courses their children have registered for in the upcoming year. So Hopkins still in the spring, just a bit earlier in April, and Hadley Elementary will have a fall open house.
I do have a question. Is there any feedback from the teachers on this as to how they felt?
I know Jen can say for her teachers. I can tell you at Hopkins Academy, they very much enjoyed what we did last year in the spring because, well, you taught at Hopkins Academy.
Yep.
It is very different, a fall open house at an elementary school than at a middle and high school. Attendance not as high at the middle and high school. So the faculty really liked how we set it up last year, which was in the spring, having these all kinds of poster boards, a common place where people could go, see clubs, see extracurriculars, rather than just having to move through their child's schedule. So yes, we did hear, which is part of the reason we're having two. Jen can speak about her staff had a different idea of what they wanted.
Sure. Okay.
The staff at Hadley Elementary School, their feedback was that while the spring event was amazing, and I think everybody had a blast, the traditional fall open house really allows families to come in and meet the classroom teachers. We also allow time to sign up for the fall conferences. And so the feedback was, while the spring event was very successful, that the traditional fall open house, if there were no restrictions around people coming into the building, that people would like that traditional event. We relooked at the calendar. There is a professional development day the following day. And so we thought that it wouldn't be a disruption to anybody's schedule, especially for parents. And that's why we chose the date of September 29th. That's historically when around the same time we've always hosted that. And then some of the feedback from my families was that they would love a spring event and a traditional open house in the fall to really get to know the teachers. Some of the families, this is their first time ever bringing their kids to school, and getting to know the teachers and seeing the classroom and where everybody's sitting is very important to them. So to do that in the fall is something that most people wanted. I have talked to the PTO. who is willing and excited to maybe host a spring event at Hadley Elementary School. So I don't want folks to think it's a subtraction of, but just maybe a different organization to host a spring event, because we still recognize that our spring event, we had so many families, the feedback was really positive, and we would love to do something like that. And so it would be hopefully something that we would plan in the spring. I would definitely look at a different date with the PTO than the Hopkins open house. Personally, as a parent, I like to be able to go to both. And I think it would just be really nice too, to have some students, maybe some Hopkins students come and join us at Hadley Elementary School.
Not to mention,
I think having both is great.
that there are parents that, no, not to mention the fact that there are parents that have, some parents that have kids at both schools.
Right. So I'm just surprised because, you know, middle school, we always got a lot of parents. It seemed like it was after that things, you know, parents weren't showing up for open house quite as much. So are they going to still do teacher conferences?
Yes.
And just have them schedule it online?
Yes, and it's easy. There's also a lot more communication. I shouldn't say a lot more communication. It's different communication, right? At Hopkins Academy, because parents are using the parent portal much more, right? You're not checking the parent portal to see if your child got to class on time at Hadley Elementary, if they attended all periods, if they turned in their homework. Like, it's so scheduling through that is, there's much more communication electronically at Hopkins Academy through School Brain. So scheduling it won't be a problem.
Great. Any other thoughts or comments about the calendar and the proposed changes? Okay, seeing none, we need to take a vote. Do I have a motion to approve this calendar as presented?
So moved.
Okay,
Seconded.
terrific. All in favor?
Aye.
Right, motion passes. Thank you, everyone. And we are moving back to item 4C for a final review and approval of JJIB-R and JJIB-E, the form. So Pipchinsky and Percy.
Sure. I'll just say, if you guys had an opportunity to look over the two forms, I just want to give thanks to Christine, who did most of the legwork, or I guess we could just say we used most of the changes, the edits that she made. And in the end, we tried to align this with MIA regulations as much as possible. And also at the end of the day, we wanted to give a little bit of space for the coaches to be able to ultimately make some of these decisions. And so that's kind of where we landed with this form. And then the move up request is pretty self-explanatory. It's just a number of signatures that the student needs to get before they can move up. Christine, anything I missed?
No, I just added a little blurb at the top of the form, as well as a link to the MIAA website so that people can look for themselves, and just change the formatting a tiny bit by, instead of saying yes or no, it just says date approved.
Okay, thank you, Ethan and Christine. Paul, Tara, any questions or comments? Yeah, I think it's pretty clear and really reflects the conversation we had last time. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the both the policy and the form.
So moved.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. Thanks, Ethan.
You're welcome.
Okay, we are on item E, school committee representative for driver negotiations.
Yep, super quick. And I will say, Humira, I'm glad that we ended up doing the action items one at a time because I realized I hadn't put the policy in the list of action items. So at the end of the meeting, I would have forgotten. So I'm glad we did these one at a time. We have driver negotiations. Initially, the school committee had recommended or had voted that Humira and Ethan would be the representatives for bus driver negotiations. The attorney, this is not the Hadley Education Association MTA. This is a different union. Those attorneys want to meet in the mornings, usually between 9 and noon. And so having said that, Chris, a retired teacher, did offer to take on that role, which I thought was, I had asked her about that and her availability, which I thought made sense given Ethan and Humira's work schedules. Also, by having one representative, it is not subject to posting of open meetings. So if we had to make last minute schedule changes, we don't have to worry about 48 hours of posting. Minutes from these meetings when they're released from executive session will be available to the public. So if it's okay with the school committee, I would recommend that we appoint Chris Pip to be the representative for driver negotiations.
Thank you, Christine.
You're welcome.
It's okay with me. Ethan?
Absolutely.
All right. Do you need us to vote on this? Yes. Okay. Yep. Okay. Do I hear a motion to appoint Christine to lead the bus driver contract negotiations?
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine.
You're welcome.
All right, moving on to 5 discussion items, clean school bus program. And
Yeah, this is really just an FYI for folks. The first round, the EPA is going to have, I think, a total of 6 rounds, or yes, total of 6 rounds, because 1 round of funding. And the funding would provide school districts with money to acquire electric school buses. First round of funding application closed on 8/19. There'll be 5 additional rounds. In subsequent rounds, also school districts can partner with third-party contractors and kind of do a joint application so that third-party contractors receive funding to purchase electric vehicles and to purchase some additional infrastructure, such as charging stations, I think up to $13,000. And about $250,000 per vehicle. If there are, as this funding becomes available, and the school committee can ask questions now, or you can be thinking about it, and when the funding becomes available in September, I can bring this topic back. But if there are any questions that you would like me to investigate as we look into this, I'm assuming, here's the assumptions I'm operating under, that this is something that overall the school committee would be interested in and in exploring, and also whether it was, even if it was working with a third-party contractor who was using more fuel-efficient and greener vehicles. So I'm operating under that assumption. I know that the town has a green committee, so I know that the town is concerned with this. Here are examples of questions that I have that I haven't yet had answered by our state. Doesn't have yet an FAQ, but Vermont has one out. I was able to get some information there, but the questions I had were how long for battery replacement. You can see I found 8 to 10 years there. Cost estimates on battery replacement. They have some now. There is some talk that the cost of batteries are expected to decrease over time. I do have some questions about the underlying assumptions associated with that decrease. Is that an assumption that the materials needed to make the batteries will become more readily available, that there'll be a declining cost or no escalation of cost in terms of disposal of batteries, like battery trash? So just having information, those are the kinds of questions I'm asking. If there are any other questions that you folks had that you would want me to look into, you can see on the agenda, and the public can also see on the agenda the information I got when I was on the webinar with the EPA that talks about funding and limits, as I said, about $250,000 per vehicle and $13,000 for infrastructure. That includes charging stations. So this was just an FYI, not an action item. And I also anticipated that potentially school committee members could be asked about this from members of the public or from other appointed or elected officials in town, since there is kind of a lot of discussion around ways that the town of Hadley can become more greener and more fuel efficient. So if you were approached and asked, is the school department participating in this? You have additional information about what the program is, how long it's expected to go, and what we would potentially be looking at doing, which would be one of those future rounds of funding that I would bring back to you.
Thank you, Annie, for keeping an eye on this and raising the questions that we would want to know. I agree with you that the town seems to be strongly in favor of leaning towards greener solutions. I think fire and safety also is exploring vehicles that are electric, if I understand, police cruisers and such. And the Green Committee is definitely very committed and really reflective of, I think, an overall sense in the town that this has to happen one day when we are eligible. So thank you for keeping an eye on this. Christine.
I just have a question. We're talking about full electric, not hybrids, correct? Is that part of it at all? It's full.
Yeah, I do believe it's full electric. I can check that, but they routinely said electric buses, and I never heard the word hybrid. It's an excellent question that I could check on the website too, but I never heard them say hybrid.
Okay, I was just curious, and because there was some mention of over a certain amount of weight that they were excluded in terms of the policy that we looked at for the town.
Oh, so let me clarify.
Okay.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. So, so this is, and I know you're saying this is separate. The town has a policy that you folks put on last time. That is kind of its standalone, that the town would, that policy that we also are recommending to the town, that policy, it would exclude any bus that was over 10,000. So school buses are excluded. The town would like to increase its energy efficiency and increase its fuel efficient vehicles and purchase fuel efficient vehicles in the future. School buses are excluded. So we wouldn't have to do this because of the town policy. This is more of, so it's not an expectation and not connected. That's an excellent question. This is more, EPA is saying we are making a significant amount of money available nationally for districts that are interested in getting more fuel efficient.
We're being proactive, basically. Yeah. Okay.
And I would hope that the moment we are eligible and you let us know that we can act. Any other thoughts or questions?
Mm-hmm.
Christine?
No, I'm just trying to lower my hand. Okay.
Okay. No action required on this. And Annie, thank you for keeping us abreast. Moving on to review of school committee meeting dates and scheduled presentations.
That is just, that's simply an FYI, that link. That doesn't mean they could change. They could, there's always business and other business reports, other things that come up. I didn't put every month the standing items, school committee reports, but just in general, I was trying to map out, trying to make it so we don't end up with school committee agendas that are just crazy, overwhelmingly packed. So trying to map it out for the year. So if there's anything as you look at that throughout the year that you say, gosh, I realize this is really missing. So I'd like to make sure that you do a presentation on this or get us data on this. And again, I heard tonight we want updates on cell phone, and so regular business would continue to happen. I just was mapping out for you the big ticket items for the year and when they get done.
Great. One thing that I hope that we can do, Annie, is work towards perhaps for the April 2023 meeting on inclusion, diversity, equity related matters. Some of the things that we've talked about in terms of like evaluating our own district's discipline policies and how that plays out, and what we talked about our report card and sort of being able to gauge our performance year after year as it relates to certain equitable, parameters. So I'm thinking maybe April 2023 would be the right time to see the first such report cards.
So I'm adding that here so I don't forget. Dashboard. Okay.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from the team? Okay. And we don't need to vote on this, but thank you for organizing us so we can look ahead. All right. We are on to the, let's see, student safety monitors for single tier bus.
Yeah. This is an update. I know all the school committees interested in this, and Tara, you had specifically asked that there's an update prior to the start of school. Because the first day for single tier, I'd have to pull the calendar back up, but it is in September. So those days where all the students ride the bus together, because Hopkins will be starting later and Hadley Elementary will dismiss early. So we have those routes, we have seating charts. The elementary, every student on the bus has an assigned seat, both elementary and Hopkins Academy students. All the elementary students are at the front of the bus. Hopkins Academy students are at the rear of the bus. And then I will be, since I have the seating charts, the Hopkins Academy students on each route, I will be asking students if they are interested in either earning service hours, the hours that they need for National Honor Society and other things. It could also be students who don't need those service hours, but would like to apply for for pay as a minimum wage position. You can't get service hours and collect pay. That's not how the service part works. But so we'll be, since I have the seating charts, we'll be asking students to apply to be kind of elementary student helpers, right? So we're not asking these Hopkins students to police their peers per se. They're not discipline enforcers. They are sitting at the front of the Hopkins crew, and they're kind of there as the elementary helpers, right? And helping us just make sure the elementary kids are comfortable. And we thought that that made sense. And hoping that that meets with your approval as a way to go forward for the single tier.
I love that framing.
I like the approach. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right. That was it with that.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Any other comments from anyone else about that? Okay, terrific. And we're on to the business manager reports. Over to you, Chris.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I have two reports for you tonight. There's no grant report because, well, right now there's no grants. So the applications were just released for the majority of them, and they haven't even been submitted yet. They're not due until next month. So typically it takes about 3 months or so for the grant report to materialize. But I do have the regular expense report. Again, because it's so early in the school year, there's really not a whole lot of excitement to report in this. If you look at the expenses we've had so far, we only had $265,000 year to date. So, really not much for me to report other than, as you go through this, there are a couple of items that when I ran the report today, I started to research just because I was wondering, how did we overspend that line already? And it was really just a question of items were posted to the wrong account. And so we were working on fixing those throughout the day. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to know exactly what to charge a line to. And I know, for example, we had some tech expenses that were charged as AV materials instead of as tech expenses. I guess technically they are AV materials, but that's not really what they were purchased as. So items like that, we just went through during the day today and corrected those. So the report that you'll get next month will have those moved out of those lines. Other than that, I know I kind of sound like a broken record when I say this, but certainly at this point in the year, no cause for concern or anything in any of the lines, but I can certainly answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Chris. No questions for me. Anyone else?
So the lunch, Chris, what's the plan for this year? Are there any subsidies for lunch money this year?
Yes, so the students will have free lunches this year. Similar to last year, not quite the same. The reimbursement rate is not going to be as high as last year, but still that's a welcome sign that we get from the state to fund that. So definitely a good news item. Besides reimbursing at what's a great rate for the lunches, it kind of puts off the fact that we were looking at a price increase that was mandated for the lunch program, and now people get a reprieve for one more year of those what are essentially looming price increases, but might as well take it while we can to avoid enacting them.
Thanks.
So are you saying that there will be some minor charge, or it's entirely free? And I ask because I think I got an email from the lunch software that said we'll be starting up again. Does that sound right? That happened in the last week.
I am not aware of that email. I apologize.
Yeah, so it doesn't sound correct, because I believe that it's 100% free. What could happen?
Yeah.
We have a brand new food services director. She's doing a great job. Hit the ground running. She may not realize that may be something that was set automatically to go out. So we can bring that to
Must
her
have been.
attention tomorrow. And
Absolutely.
yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Humara. She might have no idea.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much. All right. Thanks, Chris.
I just have one more on
Yes.
the revolving accounts report,
Yes.
which again, because it's so early in the year, there's really not a lot to report, but what it does kind of achieve is to show you where we ended the last fiscal year at, because I was not here for the July meeting, so there was no report for June 30th. So I just kind of highlighted the starting point of where we started the year off in yellow, and we'll be, moving on from there. Really not a lot of change between June and July for most of the lines, but it's just kind of there for your information.
Great. Healthy balances that we will no doubt spend down.
Yes, that's usually what happens. Yep.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Yep.
Any questions for Chris on either report? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And school committee reports discussion. First is finance. Annie referred to this earlier. There has not been a meeting yet. I continue to wait to hear from our town colleagues on them pulling that together. And CES, Tara.
No meeting this month. I will have an update for you in September at the next meeting.
Okay, terrific. Moving on to announcements. Joyce is unable to join us as our school board liaison for announcements, but we look forward to hearing from her next month. Do any of my colleagues have comments or news to share? Okay, I have one note to share, and that is that Hadley Learns is having another Hadley World's Fair. Last August was a very successful event. Over 40 people attended. We had international foods from over 30 countries. It was a lot of fun with activities that had people meeting one another and getting to know people who they may never have met in town. So the event will be September 23rd. That is a Friday from 5 to 7 p.m. And this year it's in collaboration with the library. So it will be held at the library, and the library is really getting into it by featuring cookbooks and authors and items from its selection that help the public become aware of international foods and also markets the event. So I highly urge you to put it on your calendar. We'd love to see you there. And we're so thankful to all our collaborators who are participating in helping spread the word, including you, Annie, and the superintendent's newsletter and anything we can do, just like last year, to get the word out to families that may not necessarily come out to the sports events and the regular Hadley events. This might be a great way for them to meet people both in school and outside of school. All right, terrific. And we are on to action items. So we need to approve the minutes of July 23rd. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
So, seconded.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Terrific, thank you. Approval of the AP warrants, July 2022. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, very good, thank you. Approval of the payroll warrants. This is one I think, Paul, you abstained from.
That was a question I was going to ask Andy.
I'm being, actually, after this, I don't think you'll have to, but I'm just being overly, I don't know where payroll fell. So this will probably be the last time I separate them out, and then you and Heather no longer have this issue. They'll just be approval of warrants.
Terrific. Do I hear a motion to approve the payroll warrants from July 2022?
So moved. Oh, second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, excellent. We approved the capital plan as well as the 2 handbooks, the calendar, and now-
H&I, when we reconvene in open session, so we'll go into executive and then reconvene in open. And so it's just a question about the next meeting date.
Okay, so as noted here, the next meeting date, 4th Monday, falls on September 26th. And it's noted that it's actually falls during Rosh Hashanah. And so we've never had anyone indicate that that was a problem, but knowing that that's a fact, I wonder whether we can quickly entertain an alternate date. Just the idea that we knowingly exclude a number of people who might want to come for public comment for that agenda, which we won't know what it is yet, but still. So Annie, you had a suggestion, but
I suggested September 12th. That does feel very rapid, but the good news is how many things can I get up my sleeve between now and September 12th? Probably far fewer. So it could be a lot shorter because I am not in town on the 19th. So if you are available, and actually it would be a very tight, efficient agenda because CPA would then start at 7. So we'd need to end this, and I believe CPA is on Zoom. We'd need to end this and then get to CPA.
that would be wonderfully efficient. Can other folks make it on that day, on the 12th, Monday the 12th? That would be a 5 o'clock start, Annie?
5:30, same time.
Okay, 5:30 to 7?
I'm questionable. I'll be on CPA, but I'm going to be out of state. But so it looks like you have a quorum without me.
Can other folks make it?
I may be late, but I should be able to make it.
Great. And I'm seeing a yes from Ethan and
And yes.
a nod from Christine. Okay, terrific. So we will move that to September 12th from 5 to, and we'll have a draft.
5:30 is when we normally start, because I also want to be on my 5:30.
Yep, great, 5:30 to 7.
Perfect. Okay. We would just need the motion to convene an executive session. Somebody can make that motion, and to reconvene an open session.
Okay, I move to go into executive session to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel and to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining and to reconvene in open session. Do I hear a motion? I moved. Do I hear a second?
Seconded. Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry, I should have set this up for you. You do need to roll call. That was my mistake, not to put it down for you.
Okay, no worries. Ruger,
Yes.
Pfeiffer,
Yes.
Percy,
Yes.
Kuczynski,
Yes.
and Fassiadine, yes. To approve the 2022-2023 contract for the facilities director. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, motion passes. And do I hear a motion to approve the 2022-2023 salary for the Director of Special Education?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
And then the MOU, I'm sorry, because I forgot to put it there. To approve, please, the MOU with Unit D. I forgot to list it. Memorandum of Understanding with Unit D.
Yes.
regarding medical pages.
So, right. Do I hear a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding with Unit D?
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I think that's it.
Thank you. All right, that's it. You move to adjourn and you guys are good.
Motion, so just as a reminder to the viewing public, if you're still here, our next meeting date is September 12th,
Mhm.
5:30 to 7. And do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.